Hello everyone, my name is Anna Khmaladze, young cancer nurse from Georgia, Tbilisi. I work in Caucasus Medical Center, Clinical Oncology Department. I'm senior nurse of department. I'm chair of Georgian Oncology Nursing Society. Today, we have final webinar of European Oncology Nursing Society Young Cancer Nursing Network Nightingale Challenge 2021. Today we closed, but now we have a very good webinar. This name is Post-doctoral Career, and I present to you a very brilliant speaker. She's name is Amanda Drury, is an assistant professor of nursing in the School of Nursing, Midwife and Health Systems, University College Dublin, Ireland, and Fulbright Health Impact Scholar to Memorial Sloan Kettering Current Center, New York. Amanda is an executive board member of the European Oncology Nurses Society, co-chair of the research working group member, and the post-chair of the EONS Young Cancer Nurses Network.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to 6th EONS Nightingale Challenge Webinar Post-doctoral Career. I want to special thanks for our amazing speaker and valuable information from the presentation in advance. I am remziye semerci from Turkey. I work as a doctoral research assistant in the pediatric nursing department at Drury University. I am a representative of the Turkish young cancer nurses in the EONS. Our second speaker is Dr. Gulcan Bagcıvan. I want to introduce her. Dr. Gulcan Bagcıvan is an assistant professor in the School of Nursing at Koç University, Istanbul, Turkey. Gulcan is a member of the European Oncology Nursing Society Research Working Group and a board member of the Turkish Oncology Nursing Society. Today, I learned amazing news about Gulcan. I want to share with you. She had received outstanding faculty nursing awards for this year. I congratulate to her and wish her the continued success. I hand over our amazing speakers and have enjoyed.
Thanks, Remziye and Annie. And Gulcan, congratulations, you get that quiet.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So thanks everybody for joining us this evening. We're going to do a shared presentation, so hopefully you'll bear with us, but we would like you to be interactive this evening. So if you can share your thoughts as we go through in the comments, if questions come up that are related to the topics we're talking about as the presentation goes through, Remziye and Annie will be stopping us and asking us the questions. So we want to hear from you, so don't be shy. So Gulcan, before we start, do you have anything you want to add, or?
I mean, before the presentation, I would like to thank you for the invitation, and I would like to thank all the young cancer nursing network for the job that this group has been doing. They have been doing a great job, and I am really proud of this group. And they have been contributing to the society. It is really nice, and I am really happy to be here. And thank you for the nice introduction, Remziye.
So to start off, so you've already heard who we both are. I'm an assistant professor of nursing in UCD, and Gulcan is an associate professor in, is it Koç University?
Koç University.
Koç University, thank you. So this evening, we're going to be talking about postdoctoral careers, but before we go any further, we want to know, who are you? Where are you joining us from? Are you a PhD student? Are you a postdoc? Are you someone who's at the start of your career and just thinking about wanting to do a PhD and planning for the future? So will you add in the chat, tell us a little bit about yourselves. This will be very helpful for us as we go through the presentation to know who are we talking to, what do you need to know? While you're doing that, we'll start talking. We will take a pause in a little while to have a look at the comments in the chat. And as I said, if there's any questions, we'll pause to take those. So I suppose I just want to start off very briefly with a summary of my career to date, and Gulcan will do the same. And I suppose it's useful for people to really see where we've come from and how we've landed where we've landed, perhaps, is the language to use. So I suppose my career, it took me 12 years to go from a graduate nurse to an assistant professor of nursing. And I suppose you can see here, I worked through various clinical radiation and medical oncology roles before I went into an academic role and started my PhD in 2013. And I suppose I'll be talking kind of where, when you're planning your career as a postdoc, where I was doing things in relation to this timeline. I suppose I spent 6 years after I qualified working as a staff nurse in various specialist areas, in inpatients, in outpatients. I think I moved jobs perhaps every 2 years. And really that was just getting a breadth of experience throughout clinical practice that has definitively informed my academic, my research career and my teaching. And I still try to maintain my clinical application as much as possible, working closely with my clinical partners, and where possible, trying to identify opportunities to have a clinical practice component to my role as well. I started my PhD in 2013, and as you'll see in a little while, it wasn't quite as straightforward as I decided one day to do a PhD and then it happened. It took some time. It was trying to find the right opportunity, trying to find the right funding, and eventually transitioned into a postdoctoral role. And in 2020, just as the pandemic hit, I started my first faculty role as an assistant professor of nursing. So we will be talking through our ups and downs in our careers and how we've got to where we've got, and hopefully learning from what we've done might be helpful for you. And I'm happy to share or answer any specific questions that people might have as we go through the presentation. But Gulcan, you're going to talk about your experience as well?
Yes, and yes, this is a kind of summary of my experiences, both for the teaching, for the education and the work. And I graduated from the undergraduate nursing program in 2003, and right after my graduation, I started to work as a staff nurse in a medical oncology department. And this is when my oncology nursing interest started. It was great experiences for me as a novel nurse, how oncology nurses have a power to improve the patient outcomes with their independent roles. And after these experiences, I have worked as an occupational nurse. This is completely different experiences for me. It was because of I had to move in a different city, and I found this job. But this was a kind of opportunity for me to think about what I want to do and how I want to continue for my career. And I decided to start my graduate education. And in 2006, I started my master in nursing, and I completed my master in 2008. And right after this, I started my PhD in nursing. I completed my PhD in 2012, and there was no end for being student for me, you know. And between 2014 and 18, I studied my epidemiology master. And during this time, I have worked as a lecturer at Gulcan Military Academy School of Nursing. I was kind of lucky because I didn't have to look for a job after my PhD, because already I had a position in a university, and I was teaching and I was doing my research, but it wasn't enough for me. I was looking for promotion, you know, academic promotion, or an option for the postdoc. And in 2015, I have applied for a scholarship to be taught. This is the only one organization that supports scientists for the scientific project. And I got a scholarship from this institution, and I have been in the US for 2 years for my postdoc project, and I work as a postdoc visiting scholar. During all my postgraduate and graduate education and the postdoc, I have focused on the palliative palliative care services and supportive care for the cancer patient. And after my postdoc, I come back to the Turkey, and this is another completely different transition for me. I have started to work as an education nurse in a hospital. This was because of some institutional transition. It's a very long story. I will share some of my experiences in a second regarding working as a nurse in a clinic with the PhD holders. And in 2008, I have started to work as an assistant professor at Koç University School of Nursing, and it has been almost 3 years. And now I'm an associate professor at Koç University School of Nursing. This is another good news for me. We can continue, Amanda, please. And this is the options for the postdoc career. And it's a kind of summary again. One option for the postdoc career is academic career. It can be research focus or the teaching focus. What's the option for this are postdoc, like postdoc fellowship or faculty position and the adjunct position. I would like to talk about some barriers or the opportunities for this career option actually. I mean, for the postdoc position, for example, in Turkey, unfortunately, we don't have such a position as a postdoc. And it's really important problem, I think, for the early career PhD nurses, because the only option in the academy, you can start work as a lecturer or the assistant professor after you got your PhD degree. This is really big transition, you know. You started to mentoring the PhD students right after your PhD. So I think postdoc fellowship, the postdoc position is really a good option. But unfortunately, in Turkey, we don't have any position for this. And I know most of the countries don't have such a position. And Amanda, you are now postdoc fellow. I don't know if you would like to say something here regarding your experiences.
I suppose my experiences were quite different because we do have a postdoc career structure. The university I work in at the present actually has a very clear postdoctoral career framework where you can identify your goals for development towards moving upwards. So I spent a year at the postdoctoral level after I completed my PhD. I then transitioned into a research fellow position, which would be sort of the next step. And then you may have the option to go towards a senior research fellow position later in your career, usually 5 to 10 years out. You'd have a lot of research experience at that stage. But for me, as you'll see later, I suppose thinking about job security, it's thinking about where can you get the most secure position, and sometimes that's going towards a combination of teaching and research in one position, so moving towards those faculty roles.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So another option is faculty position in the universities. Again, this position can be research focus or teaching focus, or can be both research and teaching focus. Maybe a problem regarding this is if the available faculty position is enough for all the PhD holders. In Turkey, right now, it's kind of enough, but I don't think in, let's say, in the future 5 years or 10 years, it's not going to be enough. There's not going to be enough position for all the PhD nurses. You may think like, okay, not all the PhD holders should be work in academia. You are right, but you know, another option can be the any position in a clinic that we can use our experiences and the skills. No, this is another career option. It can be like the healthcare services. For us, we can work as a nurse in a hospital. But the problem for this, again, I will mention about the Turkey. in Turkey, unfortunately, there is no such a position in the clinic that you can work as a PhD and have some privilege because of your PhD. You know, as I mentioned earlier, after my postdoc experiences, I have worked as a education nurse in a hospital, but I didn't have any privilege, and I was like a RN. But I'm really happy because, you know, in my opinion, I think we should have a position in the clinic that we can use our experiences, our knowledge and skills to improve the patient's outcomes. But yes, of course, I am expecting to have some privilege and have some extra right because of my PhD. Amanda, I don't know what it looks like in your country or in general Europe. Do you have anything to say here?
I think for my perspective, I suppose I went into my PhD with the ultimate goal of a clinical academic career, which I think is very, very common in nursing. And unfortunately, I hit the wall. We have similar experiences that you described, Gulcan, that you go into a clinical area in Ireland. The roles aren't clearly defined for clinical academic careers where they're implemented. You know, sometimes it's a nurse having a part-time role in a clinical area and a part-time academic role, which ultimately starts to add up to more than a full-time job because you're doing two mostly full-time jobs. And then in other cases, there's some sort of roles where you have strategic or leadership roles, but they have quite a substantial component, and then you're trying to wrestle your academic piece into that. I suppose we don't have clearly defined clinical academic roles here, and I suppose we see more in the UK, and we had a really great webinar last year from Mary Wells and Khmaladze, which is available on YouTube, where they talked through clinical academic careers in their experience. And I suppose, I know there was a question in the chat there a few minutes ago if we'll be talking about clinical academic careers, and I suppose to be very clear, we're probably talking about it from the experience of not being able to access those career pathways, but we do have previous webinars on that, and we can share that through the debriefing email after the session. If anyone would like that, just let us know in the chat.
Okay. And another option can be something different, like business consultants, or become an entrepreneur, and you can develop your own company with your experiences. And I saw the Andres comment in the chat box. I did like it. Or we can choose the way to do whatever we want, whatever we enjoy. So this can be another option for us. We can continue. Can we continue?
Yep, do you want me to move on?
Yes, please.
Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, these are the competencies that we need, whichever the career option we choose. We need to have some competencies that will help us to achieve our goal and to have a position, because all the career options that we have mentioned actually very competitive. This is also another thing that's a kind of challenging for us, for our, why we need to consider while we are planning our postdoc career. It's really competitive. So we need to prepare ourselves very well for that the position or the career option. And these are the competencies that we need to build up and make a very successful postdoc career. I am not going to go over all these competencies with the details. It can be another webinar of topics maybe. But I would like to really, can we continue, Amanda? Highlights some competencies if you don't have anything to add here.
Nope, I think you covered through all that, and I suppose we'll talk a little bit more about sort of maybe how to integrate those competences as we go along. But if anyone has questions about particular ones, please pop them in the chat, and I'm happy to tailor as I talk as well.
Thank you. But all that competence is really important for us to achieve our goals, to be successful. But I would like to really highlight the research competencies. It's really important for us during the PhD and also after PhD. If you take the only one take-home message from me, please take this. And I strongly suggest all of you take the research methodology, biostatistic, all the research topic courses as much as you can. And please join the training or the courses, whatever the available resources to improve your research knowledge and skills. You may think that, okay, I will have a statistician in my team, so I don't need to know all that knowledge. I don't need all the biostatistics or the research knowledge, but it's not correct, because even though you have a statistician in your team, you have to have the skills and the knowledge to develop your own research project, and you need you will need all this information while to know what you need to ask the statistician, or how you will interpret the data that your statistician sent to you, because you will be the PI in the project or in the future, and your students will ask you regarding all these methods. It's really important, and I'm saying I'm strongly suggesting you to improve your research skills and competencies, not after the PhD. You should start during the PhD, and it will be continued, because there is no end. We will be talking about this in later. We can continue, Amanda. Or do you have anything to add? Okay.
No, I think I'm going to talk about that in a few moments.
Thank you. And another thing that I would like to highlight is language, especially if you are a person who is not native speaker, native English speaker. If you are English speaker, you are very lucky in the academia, in the science world. And the language is still a problem for all of us. I mean, even just to reach out to someone to start your network or to publish your data, it's really important. I mean, you may think like, okay, I have really good national network and I have a really good national team. I don't need international team or network. Still, to share your project results or your research results, you need to improve your English, and you will be able to communicate with someone to share your result and to follow the updates regarding your topics. So it is really important. It can be another take-home message from me. Please improve your English as much as you can. It will be very helpful for you to achieve your plan and to build your international network and to be involved in an international teams. And I'm sure if you are here as a participant, you are looking for an international network. You are not a person like, okay, I'm good with my national team and I don't need this. So you should focus on this. You can continue, please.
I suppose if I might add one thing here, and this is something I have said, you'll hear me say it a lot if you've heard me speak before, is that I think we saw in the Young Cancer Nurses Network is that people can be shy or less inclined to do things because they don't feel confident with their English. And I suppose it's take any opportunities you can to work in English. And I suppose I always say is that, yes, I speak fluent English, but the people who I work with are accommodating me by working in English. So I would never, ever speak to someone or think anything of someone's English. It's that we're trying to share common understanding. We work together, and it's take those opportunities to help you to practice the English and develop it as you go along. And this can help your preparation for building those networks. So don't ever be shy to reach out. Don't ever use I don't feel my English is good enough as an excuse.
I like to comment from the Lena. Yeah, but English is our power.
So I suppose that this follows on from a lot of what Gulcan has been saying to date. And I suppose it's thinking of, we see early career research, and if you've just completed your PhD, you might feel this person is looking familiar, the stress, the pressure, trying to keep on top of everything. And I suppose we joke about this idea of your PhD being the best years of your life. You'll never have an opportunity to do research the way you've done research during your PhD. But this can have an impact on your life, your health, your well-being. And I suppose it's thinking, I suppose part of this presentation is to think about things that can support you through this, how you can sort of maintain a life outside of your academic or postdoctoral goals. I suppose thinking about issues around that do commonly come up in academia is the imposter syndrome. Where am I going? Is this as good as it gets? The precarity of going through a postdoctoral role. Where am I going after this? What would be my long-term career plan? And really, sometimes, what is my long-term career plan? So I will talk about my own experiences, and this is very much my personal story. So if you have questions, I'm happy to share them and or answer them. But I suppose when we look at research career trajectories, this is a very common figure that's thrown out in Ireland. And I don't know, I know Gulcan said there wasn't a similar figure for Turkey. But what we do see is that, you know, here we have coming in at the start, all of these people in this area are doing their PhD. And this line is the end of the PhD. So 53% of people leave academia at this point. And as you go further along, we see fewer and fewer people moving into permanent research roles, and ultimately less than 1% actually landing into professorships. The majority of people are working outside of science, outside of academic roles. So this doesn't really inspire confidence for people who are doing PhDs when you see that less than 10% of people are winding up in academic positions. What we see in Ireland is that most people are winding up working in non-governmental organisations or private research industry. I suppose the good news for nursing is that we're slightly different in that while this might be reflective of what we're seeing in nursing academia in Ireland, over the next 10 years, we are going to see a mass exodus as people are retiring from nursing in numbers we've never seen before. So I think one of our universities estimates that 50% of their faculty will retire over the next 5 years. So that will tell you sort of what the scope is for nurses who are doing PhDs. And I suppose our major challenge is that we don't have enough nurses doing PhDs in Ireland at the moment. But then we also see, outside of what our current career trajectories look like, we see these headlines that can be quite off-putting around academic roles. So not only are we dealing with that precarity, we're dealing with all of the challenges of normal life, of the environment, and like all disciplines, we're facing into funding cultures that are changing on an annual basis, particularly since COVID has come along. We've seen a mass transition towards a huge focus on COVID. People are changing their research priorities to capture that COVID focus so that they remain competitive. And for some people who were unfortunately at the wrong moment in their career when COVID hit, their careers have irrevocably been altered because suddenly they became ineligible for certain funding streams that they otherwise would have been eligible for had they been running during COVID. And in Ireland, certainly we haven't seen an adaptation in the timeframes for what an early career researcher is in order to accommodate those who were disenfranchised by the pandemic and the changes in funding calls that they couldn't apply to. And then when you're not focusing on research funding to fund your own postdoctoral career, we then have the issue of seeing jobs like this being advertised for postdocs. So this real precarity highlighted. You're working on a half time, so 50%, 2.5 days a week on a temporary 9-month contract. And so I've seen jobs advertised where it's as low as 2 days per week on a part-time 6-month basis. So this is very challenging for someone who's come perhaps from nursing, where you're very employable clinically, you can have secure position, and suddenly you're looking towards this sort of postdoctoral career where you really don't have the confidence to give up your job security if you're still in the clinical role. So in the face of all this negativity, how does a postdoctoral researcher thrive? And I suppose I always come back to, what does this even mean? What does it mean to thrive in academia? Because this is the challenge. We see mass burnout. We see a lot of people suffering from overwork. When you look at academic Twitter, you're looking at all of the achievements that everybody has, and then you're wondering, what am I doing wrong? Have I missed a beat here? Or what have I not done? Why am I not keeping up? So it can be challenging to maintain resilience in the face of all this. And I suppose Andreas brought it up in the chat. I haven't been able to look at the chat since I've been presenting, but I did see Andreas's comment about you have to do something that you enjoy. And I suppose I always talk about maintaining your passion for your research. And I suppose for someone who's starting out in a PhD, I would always say they need to have a passion for their PhD, because the days when your PhD doesn't love you, it'll make it very difficult for you to love it. And the same remains true for your postdoctoral career. So I suppose my passion has always come through, I suppose as a child, I saw myself as a nurse. I was playing dress up as a nurse. I was looking up to my mother, who was a carer for my grandfather. I suppose seeing her experience as a caregiver, my grandfather's experience as someone with dementia, and later as someone with cancer, they were all very influential in my career path and eventually to becoming a nurse. And I suppose I graduated in 2008 as a general nurse. I worked in a variety of oncology roles, and I suppose this will give you an idea of my tenacity. I knew I wanted to work in oncology. I found a unit where I thought I would like to work, and I bombarded the assistant director of nursing with emails and letters with my CV saying, I'm really enthusiastic, I really want to work here. And eventually she succumbed and she invited me to interview, and I got the job. And I suppose this was the moment when I felt my career took off. I found where I wanted to be. And I suppose my passion sort of comes through then. It's seeing what we were doing in practice. My PhD very much came from what I was doing in practice, seeing the gaps we had in survivorship care in Ireland. And it was timely because we were working through our national cancer strategy, where survivorship was suddenly starting to become more important, more recognised, and an area that we needed to discover. So this became my focus for the next few years, and as I looked for funding. And I suppose that time to do my PhD really was valuable. I suppose it's coming back to you never have the opportunity to do research like you do during your PhD. You'll never have that space to be with a topic and think about it and microanalyze it, and then start to think about, well, what do we do now that we know what we know, how do we change it? And I suppose since completing my PhD, my role and goals have been to translate what my research has been finding into practice, and also using it to educate the next generation of nurses, but be it through our undergraduate general program or in our graduate diploma programs. Gulcan, I suppose, do you have anything to add at this point? I know you had mentioned this already.
Yeah, I know further adding.
And I suppose that brings me to the next stop, is the never stop learning. And Gulcan has already highlighted this. She's like, school didn't stop when you finish your PhD, and certainly school does not stop when you finish your PhD. There's always an opportunity to learn, whether it's formal or informal. And I think every day has the potential to be a school day, no matter how far you go in your career or your education. So along the bottom here, you can see what my formal educational journey looks like in relation to my career path. So, you know, it's taking the decision when to take on more and when to step back. But for me, education was always fundamentally a balance between investing in myself and the outcome, and investing in my future, but investing in what it was for my family as well. So I had a fortune to be funded through much of my educational programs in my undergraduate in Ireland. We do have our undergraduate education funded for the most part. My master's was funded by my employer, and my PhD, I took a leap without funding to start my PhD, and started then on a very small stipend, and eventually graduated into a fellowship, which was very fortunate. But my more lateral education experiences have actually been self-funded. So in my master's in education, which I started after I completed my PhD, I'd had to make the decisions and the saving plan to ensure that I could do that. I knew I wanted to go into an academic career path when I couldn't find a clinical academic role. So making that decision that, yes, I'm going to take 6,000 euros out of my salary each year for the next 2 years and invest it in myself to complete this program and make myself competitive for a role. I suppose it's kind of always taking the balance. Then another thing that I would always say is looking at the balance between what are your opportunities versus what are your drawbacks. When I started my PhD, I was leaving a permanent job where I had a very good income to take on an unfunded PhD scholarship. And while I was lucky to eventually move into a funded PhD fellowship, there was always that very real risk that it mightn't happen. So I suppose to me, it was balancing out the, okay, I'm going to spend the next few years very poor, but very much enjoying what I'm going to do and working part-time to support myself through it. So I really do emphasize that sometimes you have to take a bet on yourself and take a risk, and you know, without some sacrifice, you won't realize what you can achieve. So Gulcan, is there anything you'd like to add here?
Thank you.
So then, I suppose every day being a school day, my life as an eternal student is then informed by the third piece of advice I have, is to be strategic and have a goal and find out what it is you need to achieve that goal, and always be looking for opportunities. So I know someone is going to ask a question earlier about how do they know what opportunities are coming? How do they hear about PhD or postdoctoral opportunities? And I suppose some of that comes to developing a plan around looking for funding, setting out time to do that, and then taking the option sometimes to invest in yourself when needs must. So when we talk about the Young Cancers Nurses Network and the Nightingale Challenge, which has been so wonderful to see over the last few weeks, it just highlights to me what an exciting time it is to be a nurse, whether you're in a clinical role, an academic role, or a clinical academic role, or in another leadership or policy position. There's so many diverse pathways. And I suppose for me, when I entered nursing in 2008, I didn't quite realize what an exciting time it would be to be a cancer nurse, because in Ireland, we were starting to implement the recommendations of the 2006 National Cancer Strategy. And I suppose that brought about very effective changes to the structure and delivery of cancer services in Ireland. But you have to acknowledge that starting off as a newly qualified nurse, I wasn't that strategic. And I suppose it was with very good mentorship, it became possible for me to carve out the career path that I have. So someone who could kind of be my critical friend and kind of highlight to me when I was maybe thinking outside the box or thinking too much inside the box. But they allowed me to, or supported me to develop a career plan that aligned with the strategy. And while we weren't making changes in survivorship care in 2011, we knew this was coming. We could see the international literature that was highlighting the changes that were coming for Ireland, and it was an acknowledged gap in our 2006 strategy. So at that time, it was very lucky that my passion was aligning with policy and emerging changes in practice. But I suppose it was to take the opportunity to leverage that. And I suppose, again, this is where mentorship becomes really important. Identifying a mentor that can support you to develop funding applications if you're looking towards PhD, that remains equally true at postdoctoral level, because yes, you might apply to be a postdoctoral researcher in a funded project, but while you are doing that, you also need to be looking for funding to support your own career plan, because you may slightly veer off your career trajectory in order to have a secure employment, but you always need to be keeping your eye on the prize. Where are you aiming to go? What are you aiming to achieve in your career? What is the ultimate goal for your research program? Where do you want to be in 5 to 10 years' time? I suppose the biggest struggle for me throughout this has been the battle between doing what I love and having job security. So giving up a job in 2012, 4 years after the worst economic recession I think we've seen in our lifetimes, and taking a dive into an unfunded position as a PhD student really was a trade-off. And I think no matter what happens, life is still happening. So life didn't stop because I decided I wanted to do a PhD. So when you're a PhD student, you know you're going to have a job for a fixed period of time, but as a postdoc, and you've seen in the job advertisements I put in the first slides, we know that those careers are less certain. There's an abundance of part-time and short-term contracts where pay is notoriously, I'm going to say crap, and I know that's not a nice word, but the pay scales are really poor. And I suppose I spent the last 10 years of my life in a relationship and married to a postdoctoral researcher in physics, where there's been very limited opportunities for us to plan our future, because we always knew that one or both of us might need to move with very short notice in order to pursue an opportunity as a postdoctoral researcher. And I suppose that's going to happen to us in the next couple of months. I'll be traveling to the USA to do my postdoctoral fellowship in Memorial Sloan Kettering in February. So I'll be gone for 4 months. And I suppose this is always the trade-off of having a postdoctoral career and an academic career, is how do you balance out these trade-offs? So our life continued despite the fact I did a PhD, despite the fact he did a postdoc. And I suppose through all of this, we tried to have our lives together. We met, we moved in together at the end of his PhD. 6 months later, I started my PhD. We got engaged in the last year of my PhD. I got married a year into my postdoctoral fellowship and started doing an MSc shortly after that. And then we had a little thing known as a pandemic. And in the middle of that, we bought and are currently renovating our first home. So it gets very busy, and I suppose you have to make a decision, where are you going to invest your energies? And I suppose it's batting smart. And we saw someone in the chat a little while ago talking about, where are you investing your energies? Is it research? Is it leadership? Is it teaching? And I suppose you make your decisions about where you're putting your focus, and you prioritize the things that are important to you. So it's making sure you may know you may work some weekends, but it's that I'm going to keep that to less than once every 2 months. I'm going to work a weekend to achieve something that I really need to achieve, that's going to stand to me in the longer term, like a funding application. But I'm not going to spend a whole weekend planning my teaching for next week that I knew 3 months ago was coming down the track. So it's being a little bit strategic in your planning and setting out time to achieve the things you know you need to achieve. So Gulcan, at this point, do you want to add anything here?
You covered very well this topic, but I just want to say I hope to have many options that we are doing with what we are doing, and not worrying about job security. This is my hope. Yeah.
I would love to see this as well. And I suppose this has been in a house where 2 of us were postdocs at the same time between 2016 and 2018. I suppose my husband knew I was preparing this slide, and he said, it's really important that you share the realities of postdoctoral career. And just 4 weeks ago, my husband decided that the precarity of academia was not going to be for him anymore. So he had his own research fellowship that he's held for the last 3 years. He was in a university, but the pandemic has left him in a situation where he wasn't eligible for funding tracks that were coming up, or they were divergent from the areas where he would be seeking funding. So he's been very fortunate. He took all of his experiences that he's developed across multiple projects in engineering, in science, and in chemistry to secure a job as an engineer working with an international technology firm. But I suppose his trajectory has been and Gulcan identified this in one of her slides, was identifying what transferable skills you have developed through your PhD and know what's my backup plan. I suppose for me, I had made a decision that by 2021, if I hadn't secured a permanent academic contract, I was going back to a clinical role, and I was very happy to do that. I wasn't willing to spend the next 10 years working on 6-month or 1 year or 2 year contracts. I needed to know at what point would my life become a little bit more secure? Where could I start planning to get married, buy a first house, and everything else that will come as life develops?
And I wonder, I'm so sorry, maybe we can highlight, in the literature and from our, experiences, we can say that life and work balance is very important factor that affect the post-career successful. So I don't know what's the formula or what's the best suggestion have for the balance between the work life and the job. But it's really important. We shouldn't just focusing on the career or just focusing on the life. But as I said earlier, I don't know the best suggestion. Maybe after our presentation, we can ask our senior participants. I see the many of them, so it can be something that we can talk about later.
Absolutely. And I think, I suppose I think with me, it's really just being smart about where you invest your energies and looking at where you want to be in 5 years, working backwards from that and identifying what do you need to achieve to get there. And I suppose I have some suggestions on this as we come along, but this is the next piece of advice is don't be afraid to fail. You will need to pursue opportunities that will get you where you want to be. And Gulcan suggested we talk about failure as the first attempt in learning.
Yeah, I really like this abbreviation, regarding the don't be shy or don't giving up, because the fail is stand for first attempt in the learning. I have an example for this. I have a publication and it was submitted after 13 submission. Yeah, I'm not kidding. It's after 13 submission. But now this is one of my most cited article. So I am really happy because of I didn't give up to continue to submit that article in a journal. Because I mean, all the fail needs to be something that we are learning from. What I did is I always revise my manuscript based on the previous comment from the journal and reviewer. And now, as I thought, this is one of the most cited articles. Yeah, we should give up.
No. And I suppose this is where I think earlier in the presentation I said about, we develop imposter syndrome. We see everybody's success on social media and we don't see the CV of failures. This is the invisible curriculum. And I suppose I look at this is my CV of failures. For every promotion and every role change I've had, there was a lot of planning and there were several failed attempts. Nobody is ever successful on the first go. So like that, Gulcan, you were very persistent for 30 submissions. I'm not sure I would be that resilient. But like I have 14 papers published, but that was after many, many editor and reviewer rejections. And for every successful grant application, I think I spent most of 2018 writing grants. And I think I wrote something like 20 grants in a year. That was my full-time job. And for every 8 or 9 unsuccessful grants, I had 1 successful grant. So it's about 1 in 10 batting average. And if you look at my research income, I've applied for about 20.9 million euros worth of funding in the last 4 years. 1.2 was successful, and not all of that is my funding. Some of that is collaboration, it's working with others, and it's taking opportunities to collaborate. I suppose that's the next thing that I would say is identifying the people that you're working with, developing your international networks, taking opportunities to come in as sort of a researcher on European projects or international projects, and leveraging that to develop your own skills in writing grants. And I suppose the other thing I would always say, and it comes back to the issue of English, someone might say, oh, I don't want to do these presentations or build these networks because I'm not confident about my English. I would say, and I always recall the anecdote of my very first European presentation, where someone came to me at the end and she said, your slides were beautiful, but I had no idea what you were saying. You spoke too fast. So I had the opposite problem of being far too confident in my English. And when I'm nervous, I speak too fast. And because I'm Irish, I speak fast anyway. So what that resulted in was a blur of muck. So nobody knew what I was saying. So these are skills you develop, and it's I always take that as, at the time, it was a very upsetting piece of feedback, but it was an important piece of feedback. It helped me to realize I need to start to slow down. How do I develop my presentations, and how do I make sure that people who may not speak English as their first language definitely can understand me? And I hope I'm doing better today, I hope, than I did 10 years ago. And I suppose coming out of the CV of failures, it's this idea of your activity and your output. So as a postdoc, as a PhD student, you need to show people you're active. So identifying what things you're doing, you're demonstrating increasing levels of networking, responsibility, increasing number of first authored or other authored publications, working within teams, conferences, your collaborations with your international networks comes through your grant applications and your publications. And I suppose the outputs then are the evidence of your activity. So I suppose all of this needs to be captured in your CV. So what activities are you doing, but then being able to articulate what's the impact and the outcome of those activities. And then I'm realizing coming very close to time, but I think the last really important tip is finding a mentor. And I talk about having a number of mentors, and one of my very dear friends talks about having a mentor for every occasion. You have a mentor, different mentors who give you different things, who have different areas of expertise, but above all will always be your critical friend, who will be very honest with you when you come to them with a problem or come to them with a plan, and will give you that critical feedback that you need. And I suppose you need to ask for this. I suppose don't ever be afraid to ask someone to mentor you if there's someone who you admire. I know it can be difficult to identify a mentor. It can be very intimidating approaching a mentor, but it's a privilege to be asked to mentor someone. So I don't think you should ever be shy. I think if someone came to me asking me to mentor them, I think it would be just an enormous privilege to be asked, and for someone to feel that they could ask me that. So I think you have to take that. And then for someone who's trying to identify potential mentors who have challenges around that, is looking for local events where you can start to build networks in your own countries, identify those people. Attending international events might be more difficult, but look for funding to attend these early career awards, to attend conferences. And when you get to those events, don't be afraid to go up and talk to the speaker at the end of their presentation. Tell them you enjoyed their presentation, ask them, can you meet them, can you for a coffee? And if you manage to get their contact information, always follow up. Send them an email, say it was lovely to meet you. I hope I can keep in touch with you. Can I ask you some questions? I'm planning to achieve. Can I ask you what your thoughts on this are? Here's my plan. Tell me what you think. And then the other side of this is mentors are not always professors. They're not always senior experts. Sometimes your mentors are your friends and your peers. And the 6 people along the bottom here, and it's probably grown since I developed this slide, and it gets more difficult to fit all of my peer mentors in there. But it's identifying people who are at the same point in their career as you. You're sharing this experience. You all have similar challenges. You will have navigated different barriers at different times. So it's about talking to each other and sharing those experiences and learning from each other as well. So Gulcan, is there anything you want to add there?
No, I mean, maybe I would like to suggest also having a mentor from, if you need, based on the topic, from the other profession, not just from the nursing profession. It can be also good for us based on our topic. Yeah.
And so coming to the end and the very final point, when you reach where you were planning to go, you need to share your success, send the lift back down. You have a huge opportunity to mentor others, and I think it's always important that you give back. And I suppose I would always say that for me to get where I've gotten, it's taken a village. There have been people who have invested time, who have invested their insight, who have been very generous with their experience to help me along my career. And I suppose it's only for me now at this point to pay that experience forward and share it with those who are coming behind. So I would always say, don't ever forget to pay back what you've experienced, and then remember to say thank you to the people who supported you, and let them know how valued their input has been, and the support that you've received. So at the end of today, it's to really start by doing what's necessary. So I would say identify one thing that you think you can do today to start moving towards where you want to be. And before you know it, you'll be doing many, many things, and you'll be doing what you thought was impossible. So I would like to just thank everybody for their patience, and thank you to EONS for the invitation to speak tonight, and to the Young Cancer Nurses Network. And I'll stop sharing, and I hope we can have a little bit of time for questions.
Yes, thanks a lot for interesting and excellent presentations and the information which you are share for us. It's really nice. I have one question. When you start to learn during PhD patient, or how it has happened?
I didn't hear a part of the question.
What?
Can you repeat please, Anna?
Yes. When you learn during PhD, you work with patients. or how it is happen? You work in hospital during when you learn PhD or masters. During PhD process, you work with patients. For example, hospital you work, or for university you work.
So during my PhD, I maintained a part-time clinical role. Towards the end, it became quite difficult because it wasn't a formal part of my PhD. This was partially to maintain my clinical credibility, but also to maintain the financial stability of doing a PhD. Unfortunately, there are not that many clinical academic PhD pathways in Ireland, but I do see they are coming.
Thank you. Another question we have, if a country have not program for nurses who want to learn masters or PhD nurses, how they can find some programs?
First, maybe if you don't have such a program in your country, first you can decide which country you would like to study. Based on your interests, maybe as Amanda suggested, you can look for a mentor from other countries and from other universities. And I mean, based on your interest topic, I suggest search the academician, and in the meetings and the conference, maybe you can find someone who can be a good fit as a mentor for you. It can be a good starter. I don't know, Amanda, if you have any other suggestions.
I think it's also looking through websites like Proposal Central, and sometimes the Times Higher Education would include advertisements for scholarships. I think one thing that worked quite well for me was identifying, sometimes I didn't hear about calls until it was too late in the year. So the call would be 4 weeks away. There was no way you were going to be able to develop the application. So when that happened, I would put a reminder in my diary or my Google Calendar for 6 weeks earlier than when I heard about it to start looking for it, and reminders to keep looking for it until the call opened.
Thank you.
Okay, Annie, I want to ask a question. I want to ask both of you, our speaker, does the EONS have or offer any post-doc option?
The EONS or?
Yes, EONS.
I don't know. Amanda,
Amanda, do you know?
So EONS does not, so I suppose as a postdoctoral employment, is it, Remziye?
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, no, but I suppose we do have the research working group where we would, and I suppose this is one of the areas we're trying to look at in the medium term, is how we start developing a network for postdoctoral researchers and early career researchers. I think it's a case of it's a medium to long term vision, so watch this space, but we will hope to keep the young cancer nurses very well informed and hopefully promote that if and when we achieve it.
Okay, thank you so much. And I think nobody asked any question, so we can close the session. Annie?
Okay. If you attended all webinars, you can hear very important information from webinars that will help you in the process. In webinars, excellent speakers and teams took part, for which we thank them and wish them well and success in family and careers, as well as thanks to everyone who attended all webinars.
Okay, we have come to the end of our webinar. Thank you everyone for your attendance. I want to especially thank for our speakers and for their presenting, and I wish you have a nice rest of the evening. Bye bye.